He didn't set out to become famous. He just picked up a camera and sailed into the unknown. Bobby White turned a simple dream of life on the water into one of YouTube's most recognizable sailing journeys, captivating millions with freedom, humor, and open horizons. But behind the sunsets and smooth edits were violent storms, emotional losses, and moments where survival was never guaranteed. This is the untold side of his journey, and why Bobby's life at sea took turns no one saw coming. Before anyone knew him as a sailor or a YouTube personality, Bobby White spent nearly 2 decades in the sky. He built a solid career as a corporate pilot, flying Gulfstream jets and other private aircraft for wealthy clients, shuttling between international hubs and luxury destinations. Dallas, Texas was his official home base, but his work rarely kept him there. With more than 7,000 flight hours logged, he often found himself stationed for long periods in places like Abuja, Nigeria, and Dubai. The pace was relentless, but the pay was steady, the travel non-stop, and the adrenaline hard to walk away from. Everything unraveled in September 2015. Bobby woke up with what felt like a severe headache and assumed it was nothing serious. When he tried texting his girlfriend, the words on his phone suddenly stopped making sense. He brushed it off, took medication, and attempted to push through the day, unaware that he was making the situation worse. As his symptoms grew more alarming, he finally drove himself to urgent care. A CT scan delivered the shock he never expected. Bobby had suffered a hemorrhagic stroke that caused significant brain damage. He was airlifted to a hospital in Dallas, where he spent 11 days in the neuroscience intensive care unit. Doctors performed 3 procedures just to stabilize him. Recovery was long and grueling. At one point, he had to relearn how to read, spending months retraining his brain to recognize letters and process language again. When the immediate crisis passed, the reality hit even harder. Doctors told him that his medical certification to fly was permanently revoked. At just 38 years old, the career he had built since his youth was gone overnight. For a time, he felt completely lost. He tried pivoting into real estate, following a path familiar to him through his mother, but after 8 months, the stress became overwhelming, and he walked away from that too. It was during that low point that something unexpected caught his attention. While scrolling online, Bobby began watching sailing channels on YouTube, couples documenting life at sea, living simply and chasing freedom. The idea struck a nerve. He had always carried a quiet dream of sailing around the world, inspired by books he'd read growing up. Suddenly, with nothing tying him to his old life, the idea no longer felt impossible. He made a decisive break. Bobby sold most of his belongings and bought a 1984 37-foot C&C sailboat named Rough Seas for $24,000. In October 2016, he left Galveston Bay with his 2 Labradoodles, Maverick and Goose, and began documenting the journey on a new YouTube channel. At first, the videos were simply a way to help pay the bills. Slowly, an audience formed. By mid-2017, things finally seemed to be turning around. Rough Seas carried him out of Texas, across the Gulf, through the Florida Keys, and onward to the Bahamas and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The channel was earning just enough to cover food and boat repairs, and viewers connected with the raw honesty, the leaks, the breakdowns, and the reality of learning to sail the hard way. A potential buyer even expressed interest in purchasing the boat. For the first time in years, Bobby felt like momentum was on his side. Then, Hurricane Maria hit. In September 2017, while Bobby was away working a delivery job, the storm tore through Puerto Rico with winds exceeding 100 miles per hour. Rough Seas was tied up in the harbor, defenseless. When Bobby returned, the damage was devastating. The mast was snapped, the hull cracked, and the cabin flooded. The boat was beyond saving. The buyer walked away, the insurance payout barely covered the loss, and repairs were impossible. With no other option, Bobby handed the boat over to someone who could salvage it for parts and walked away from rough seas. For most people, losing a boat like Rough Seas would have been the end of the journey. For Bobby White, it became an unexpected turning point. Not long after the loss, another sailor reached out with an offer, helped deliver a 50-foot Beneteau called White Squall from Vancouver to Thailand. The route was ambitious, down the coast of Mexico, then across the Pacific through French Polynesia, Tonga, and Fiji, before finally reaching Southeast Asia. It would take months. Bobby said yes. The voyage was anything but easy. Equipment failed constantly. Throttle cables snapped, electronics malfunctioned, autopilots quit without warning. Weeks of rough seas wore down both the boat and the crew. Still, by August 2018, they made it to Thailand. Along the way, Bobby kept filming, and something quietly shifted. Viewership jumped. Without much fanfare, sailing Doodles stopped being a side project and became his full-time work. But the day Hurricane Maria destroyed rough seas never really left him. It reshaped how he viewed the ocean, not as something to conquer, but something that always had the final say. That lesson came rushing back in late 2020. Bobby was sailing solo along the coast of North Carolina aboard a 56-foot ketch called Naughty Dogs, moving steadily offshore, when a chain of small problems began to stack up. The anchor shifted and fouled the propeller, killing the engine. As systems strained under the load, part of the transmission overheated. Smoke filled the cabin before he fully understood what was happening, and then a fire broke out. Bobby managed to call for help, and the Coast Guard arrived in time to pull him off safely. He escaped unharmed, but Naughty Dogs did not. Fire, smoke, and the water used to extinguish the flames caused severe damage. Repairs later cost far more than expected, and insurance covered only a fraction. Looking back, Bobby admitted the incident was a sobering reminder of how quickly small errors can become life-threatening when you're alone at sea. That same year brought a quieter but deeply personal loss. Maverick, one of the two Labradoodles who had become familiar faces in his early videos, passed away after a long illness. Goose, the other dog, went to live with Bobby's parents in Texas, as constant travel no longer felt fair. Even then, the ocean wasn't finished testing him. The biggest blow was still ahead. For years, Bobby had dreamed of designing the perfect boat, something modern, efficient, and built for serious cruising. In 2024, that dream finally seemed real when he took delivery of his Custom Island Spirit 525E hybrid catamaran in Thailand. It featured electric motors, lithium batteries, solar power, and a lightweight design meant for long passages. After everything he'd been through, he believed this boat would finally carry him forward. The optimism didn't last. Just 2 days into the voyage toward Singapore, fuel contamination forced the crew to stop. They set off again on December 17th, but soon suspected a shaft seal problem as water began seeping in. By December 19th, the drive system shorted out entirely. They attempted to anchor near a river mouth to assess the damage, but the anchor failed to hold. Heavy surf pushed the catamaran onto shore, where it was battered relentlessly by waves for 2 nights. The damage was catastrophic. Salt water destroyed the electronics. The generator was ruined. The lithium batteries were soaked, somehow without igniting. The hull survived, but the interior was devastated. After 2 weeks, salvors managed to refloat the boat using airbags and tow it to a yard. Surveyors later confirmed what Bobby already feared. The vessel was a total loss. In a stunned video titled "Wrecked, My New Boat is Totaled," he struggled to process how a dream years in the making had ended in just days. As if that weren't enough, February delivered another blow. A tornado tore through the boatyard, damaging the wreck yet again before any repair plans could even be finalized. The insurance process dragged on endlessly, leaving Bobby stuck in limbo between the future he had planned and the reality he was now facing. It felt as if the sea, or fate itself, was daring him to give up. One of the crew members on the White Squall delivery in 2017 was Laura, a traveling ICU nurse Bobby had first met in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Her experience working with stroke patients gave them an easy starting point for conversation, and what began as casual curiosity slowly grew into something deeper. Before long, Laura was helping behind the camera and settling into daily life aboard the boat. For nearly 2 years, they documented their journey sailing across the Pacific. Laura naturally took on much of the day-to-day rhythm, handling camera work, monitoring charts, and keeping things organized, while Bobby focused on navigating and moving the boat. Viewers quickly noticed her calm presence, especially when equipment failed or plans unraveled. She brought structure to a life that was often chaotic. But life at sea is demanding. Repairs never seemed to end, schedules collapsed, and living in close quarters without privacy wore them down. Filming everything for an audience only added pressure. By 2020, the excitement had faded into exhaustion, and they chose to part ways. There was no public fallout or dramatic ending. The lifestyle itself was the strain. Laura stepped ashore, later starting her own channel and moving toward a more settled routine. Bobby rarely speaks about the breakup, usually redirecting attention to boat projects and future plans. After Laura's departure, Sailing Doodles shifted into a rotating crew format. Friends, fans, and short-term crew members came aboard for different legs of the journey. While the changing faces brought fresh energy, they also sparked speculation, as departures often happened abruptly. As the years went on, online forums began dissecting each crew change, fueling rumors about tension, boundaries, and expectations. Bobby eventually addressed the criticism in interviews and podcasts, maintaining that crew selections were based on enthusiasm and comfort on camera, not romance. Bobby White often described crew departures as mutual decisions, shaped by the pressure of tight living quarters and the unpredictability of life at sea. One former crew member, Sydney, publicly defended him, praising his professionalism and the skills she gained on board, while others chose to stay quiet. Over time, the constant turnover shifted. Sailing Doodles away from group adventures toward more solo content, but the rumors never fully went away. By 2021, the strain caught up with Bobby White. Years of non-stop sail handling, rigging adjustments, and maintenance left him exhausted. Looking for relief, he made a drastic change, buying a Hatteras 60 motor yacht, jokingly calling it the dark side. Later, he added a Sea Ray 340 for shallow cruising in the Bahamas. At first, the simplicity felt liberating. No sail trim, no constant tweaking. But after a few seasons, the routine grew stale. What he missed was the wind, the quiet challenge and satisfaction of real sailing. By August 2024, Bobby told viewers he was ready to sell the motor yacht and return to sail. He ordered a new Island Spirit 525E hybrid electric catamaran, hoping modern systems could simplify life without losing the soul of sailing. The experience ultimately confirmed what he already knew. Technology can help, but it can't replace the feeling that drew him to the sea in the first place. Around that time, Amanda Zachary became a bright spot. She had appeared on the channel years earlier and returned as Bobby's partner in 2023. Viewers quickly connected with her upbeat energy, and for about a year and a half, the two sailed the Caribbean together, with audiences following both the journey and their chemistry. In February 2025, they announced their breakup in a video titled, "We're Splitting Up, Not Clickbait." The split was described as amicable, but the reasons ran deeper. Approaching 50, Bobby wanted stability, a home base and fewer long passages, while Amanda still wanted constant movement and exploration. It wasn't about affection, but direction. Amanda went on to start her own YouTube channel and continued sailing solo. Bobby stayed in the Bahamas, focusing on maintenance and filming. In a later podcast, he admitted the lifestyle could be isolating and that dating while constantly moving felt nearly impossible. As upload gaps stretched through the summer, speculation resurfaced online. By October 2025, Bobby was once again sailing alone, quietly settled into a rhythm that, for now, seemed to fit. When a stroke abruptly ended Bobby White's aviation career, he never imagined YouTube would become his financial lifeline. By 2025, Sailing Doodles had grown far beyond a side project, passing 717,000 subscribers and more than 451 million total views. Ad revenue alone fluctuates, usually a few $1,000s a month, sometimes reaching around $4,000. But it's only part of the picture. The bulk of his income comes from brand partnerships, Patreon supporters, merchandise sales, and his podcast. Combined, creator analysts estimate Bobby White earns roughly $200,000 to $300,000 a year. He's worked with marine brands like Highfield Boats, sells Sailing Doodles branded apparel, and offers bonus content to Patreon members who want a closer look behind the scenes. His podcast has also become a steady outlet, allowing him to talk more openly about heartbreak, burnout, and life decisions that don't always fit into a weekly sailing video. Over time, Bobby shifted from simply documenting adventures to sharing what years at sea had taught him. Without presenting himself as an expert, he began offering practical online courses on topics like full-time cruising, ocean crossings, and maintaining hybrid-powered boats. Lessons shaped as much by mistakes as by success. He's also spoken at sailing events, breaking down the real costs of cruising, essential gear, and the mental toll of long passages. A recurring message runs through his work: don't wait forever to chase the dream. Losing his flying career overnight taught him that some plans can't be postponed. While he avoids flashy charity campaigns, he quietly contributes when possible, donating proceeds from rebuilt boats and supporting local causes, often without fanfare. Now 48, Bobby continues operating mainly out of the Bahamas, currently living aboard his powerboat Naughty Dogs, while insurance issues and future boat plans unfold. Recent videos show him cruising the Abacos, with hints of future routes through the Caribbean, the U.S. East Coast, and even the Mediterranean, where his Greece charters drew strong viewership. He posts consistently, the podcast keeps growing, and his content has expanded to include realistic cruising budgets, navigation tools, and health at sea. These days, he sails mostly alone. Former crew members occasionally join for short stretches, but the rhythm has changed. Bobby has settled into a quieter pace, one where people come and go and the ocean remains the constant.